Hello everyone and welcome back to another retro gaming video. We're going to be doing an unboxing for this video. Today in the mail from Amazon I received a Brawler 64 gamepad. Picked this up on Amazon. I think it was about $34, maybe $35. This is by Retro Fighters. It is basically a new controller for the Nintendo 64. One of my controllers is starting to fail. I've had the controller since 1997, so for about 23 years now. And I've heard good things about the Brawler 64. We're going to go ahead and get it opened, and we're going to just discuss the controller here. So let's go ahead and pop this. It looks like I don't think there's any tape, but yeah, there we go. So here's the controller itself, and it has the connector for the Nintendo 64. See how it feels. It feels more like it's more like, of course, more like a modern controller. It does have, looks like it does have a slot for Rumble Pack and memory card. I have heard that this does not work with the transfer pack. So for Pokemon Stadium, it won't work for that. But yeah, basic controller here. So you got your D-pad, your analog stick, start, A and B, C buttons, L and R triggers, and then the Z triggers are actually now, there's two of them, and they are here. These feel a little bit weird. The Z trigger on the Nintendo 64 this feels like it has kind of like a slight delay. Like there's a little bit of resistance to it. I don't think the Nintendo 64 one really had that kind of resistance. But you have two Z triggers, and then again LR, your C buttons, A, B, start, D-pad, and your analog stick. It looks like there is a turbo button as well as a button to clear. I don't know if there's any kind of instructions. Oh, here we go. See how the here's a little instruction booklet in here. Yeah, so it says to activate turbo mode, press and hold the turbo button, and the button you wish to activate turbo to. The button will now be activated with a turbo function. To remove turbo, press and hold the clear button. So basically, if you need a turbo button, basically you just basically hold that down and the button you want. If you want to get rid of the turbo, get rid of it, you can clear it right here. So turbo and clear. It feels pretty nice. It's kind of got like a matte finish almost, and it's almost kind of reminiscent of the translucent controllers Nintendo did. I think they did like ice blue and atomic purple and all that. So I think they're kind of trying to make it look like that, kind of. You can see some of the circuitry in there as well. So yeah, the only thing that's kind of weird feeling are these Z triggers. I don't know if you can. So they're more obviously shaped like, I think, like shaped kind of like the PlayStation 3 triggers or even the Xbox 360 triggers. But there's a little bit of resistance there on those triggers. Aside from that, it feels good. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug it in. Going to play some games. I'm going to come back and give my thoughts on the controller. Probably going to try, a variety of games with this, and then just I'll later in the video I'll let you know what I think of the actual controller and how it plays on a Nintendo 64 console. So we'll be right back with that. All right, and we are back. Just played a few games using the Brawler 64. Played GoldenEye, WWF No Mercy, Mortal Kombat 4, and Wave Race. And overall, I'm pretty impressed with the controller, especially with the analog stick here. So I had noticed with my Nintendo 64 controllers, I have two of them, or two of the original ones, that the analog sticks are getting kind of worn out, and aiming in games like GoldenEye was getting pretty difficult. But this analog stick here worked pretty well for doing the aiming, because in GoldenEye you can basically press down on I think it's the right trigger, or this is the right bumper. I would use that. Use the right bumper, and then you basically aim and fire with the Z trigger. And this analog stick worked really well for that. I didn't really care for the triggers just because it's got that resistance we talked about earlier. It fires, if you rapid fire like that or like that, it still fires pretty quickly, but it feels like it's maybe a split second or two behind the speed on like single firing like the PPK or the DD44. Because one of the things I like to do in those games is just basically go in and just rapid fire that like that, and this feels a little bit slower on this. I mean, the response time to the game, probably just because there is that extra little bit of delay when you are pulling this trigger, because you actually have to pull it. The other one you can basically just tap very rapidly. That's kind of a minor complaint. WWF No Mercy was the next game I played, and that played pretty well. The analog stick doesn't really come into play in that game all that often. Basically, the only thing that I think you use it for really is doing your finishers, because you basically grapple, and then if you're in special, you basically just tap that to do your finishing move. Mostly uses the D-pad, so WWF No Mercy, basically the wrestler moves around just with the D-pad, and that felt pretty good. The bottom C button here is used for like throwing and running, and that felt good. The only weird thing with that I kind of was wish this was maybe a little bit bigger was the right bumper is used when you want to try to reverse a hold or reverse a move, and just tapping on it like that when I'm holding it like this felt not quite as comfortable as the original for No Mercy. It still felt pretty good, and I like that the buttons are fairly close together, so you can basically do your runs and all that, and basically climbing turnbuckles and getting in and out of the ring like that. Only complaint with No Mercy was that this feels a little bit cramped when you're kind of like trying to reverse like that, because in No Mercy on the higher difficulties, you're going to be basically tapping the right bumper a lot. Next game I played up was Mortal Kombat. It uses both the analog stick or the D-pad. I kind of prefer the D-pad just to, I think it's a little bit more precise, especially when you're trying to do fatalities and things. Just like with the analog stick, even on the original controller, you go like forward, down, forward, and if you like were a little bit off, it might register as it being a diagonal. So with Mortal Kombat on the Nintendo 64 and just Mortal Kombat on consoles in general, if it supports it, I usually use the D-pad. The D-pad felt pretty good for Mortal Kombat, so I was able to pull off quite a few moves, even some of the more complex moves you can still do with a single D-pad. So like Sub-Zero, it's usually down, forward, and low punch for the ice ball. So you can still kind of just rock your finger like that. So you're basically just going down and then sliding up that way, and then tapping your low punch button to throw the ice ball. So that felt pretty good in there as well for Mortal Kombat. And then some of the moves are like basically, I think it's like low punch, high punch, high kick, block, and run. And then I believe I don't recall what these are for, but I think the Z triggers also are used for block. So pretty well for Mortal Kombat. And the last game I played briefly was Wave Race. And Wave Race worked pretty well with the analog stick, the controls, and the controls feel pretty good for that as well. I still think there are some games I might prefer the original controller for, but so far as a kind of a modern age replacement, I'm enjoying this so far. I'm gonna have to play with it a little bit more. I did use the Rumble Pack for GoldenEye, and that just basically works like you would expect. You basically just pop it in and it's good to go. But I didn't use any memory cards. I think I still have one memory card, but I don't really have a whole lot of stuff on it, so I don't really use those very often. But other than, I think my main issue is probably these Z triggers, and then again for WWF No Mercy, if you're kind of gripping it, trying to basically like that, tapping it, it just gets a little bit kind of like it feels like it's a little too close together. But aside from the Z triggers and that, digging this controller again. This is the Brawler 64 by Retro Fighters. Again, I picked this one up on Amazon for about $34. I think they claim that they retail for $50. So if you can get it for less, obviously get it on Amazon if you can, because it's going to be a little bit less on there. It looks like. But that's gonna do it for this controller review. I believe there are other Nintendo 64 third-party controllers that are new. I might try some of those out in the future, but for now, kind of dig in the Brawler 64. A couple small issues, but that's about it. And that's gonna do it for this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.